Hello everyone, and welcome to my very first YouTube video. I figured I might as well get something up, and what better to start with than Lucky. Now, Lucky is a framework for the Crystal programming language. It's a web framework, very similar, I'm hesitant to say similar to Rails, but similar to Rails. In that, it utilizes a somewhat active record pattern for its ORM. It is a powerful, fast web framework that's easy to use. Now, the big difference, obviously, Rails is a Ruby application. Lucky, on the other hand, is a Crystal application, which means that you get all the inherent benefits of Crystal, like static typing, compilation, and all that fun stuff. So, as you can see, they're headed right here. Build lightning-fast web apps with fewer bugs. That basically is what compilation in general comes down to, and static typing. You make faster programs with fewer bugs because you're catching those bugs at compile time instead of at runtime. I'll do more tutorials on Crystal in general in the future. But in this case, I'm using Lucky to rebuild my own personal site. I figured, why not showcase Lucky as my first video? It's a great framework. It's starting to stabilize a little bit as Crystal is nearing V1. So, without further ado, let's get started. So, first of all, installing Lucky is not going to be quite as easy as installing something like Rails. Crystal's package manager shards doesn't have the ability to go fetch a binary, download it, or fetch a package, download it, and create a binary and install it for you like Gems does. So for the time being, you have to fetch the source and compile from source. So let's go ahead and do that. This is a tutorial, right? So we're on Linux right now. I'm on Arch, but these instructions should be fairly synonymous with any Linux distribution. So we're going to git clone the CLI repo here. Let's just copy the link there. Let's go here. I'm going to cd to a temporary directory. Okay, so now we are in the Lucky CLI directory. Now it says to check out the latest release version, which is always a good idea. So we're going to do that. And you see we've checked out the latest version. Now we're going to run shards install. Oops. And there's only one dependency, so that was quick. And run Crystal build source and lucky.cr, and we're going to do. Now, normally I would add the release flag here, but release mode does take a little bit longer to compile. So we're not going to do that right now. So we're going to run Crystal build and build out the binary. And this will take a few seconds. Okay, so it took 25 seconds to build in not in release mode. This is one thing with Crystal. It's not. Its compilation times aren't extremely fast. For small projects, yeah, it'll compile in seconds and you'll have something nice and fast. For larger projects, it takes exponentially longer and longer to compile. Hopefully this will be fixed, probably not pre-V1, but if we could have it fixed, sometime in the not-too-distant future, I'd be extremely happy. So, let's get rid of that. So, now if we look in our current directory, we've got this Lucky binary. If I run lucky help, yeah, you can see. So this is something that I hope changes. But for now, you can only get help for a Lucky project if you're in a Lucky project. And this is part of the compiled nature of Lucky and of Crystal in general. So the Lucky binary, when you run help in a project that you're working inside of, it's going to go recompile really quickly the help files or the client files. And the reason it does this is because some of the commands are dependent on what you have in your project. So you can actually create custom commands like you can with Rails. And then when you run Lucky Help, it'll show those commands inside of the help. You can also run like Lucky Routes, which I'll show you here in a bit, which will show all the routes, but obviously to do so, because it's compiled language, it has to know what the routes are, so it has to compile your project first. So it's a downside a little bit if you're comparing it to something like Rails, or in the JavaScript community Adonis, or Laravel, or what have you, and all these web frameworks that are in non-compiled languages. But it's something you get used to. The amount of time it takes isn't huge. It's, in my opinion, worth it for the speed benefit you get, and being able to check things at runtime or compile time and not have these runtime errors that you normally have in a Rails application. If you miss something, or if you go and you're trying to reference a variable that's undefined or a property that's undefined, you don't have that problem with Crystal unless you specifically make that your problem. So we're built. Now you can move the generated Lucky binary to your path. So you can either move it to user local bin or user bin, or you can link it. I usually go with the linking because then if I want to update, all I have to do is go back into the Lucky folder, do git checkout again, rebuild, and I don't have to worry about moving it again because it's already there. So now let's move on to the next part. We're going to start a new Lucky project. So Lucky has a command called Lucky init, as we saw in this help message over here. And it's going to give us a couple options. So I'm going to actually stay here. And what I'm going to do is Lucky init, and then you don't actually even need to put in a project name, it'll ask you. So we're just going to call this test project, because why not be super original? And then here it's going to ask API only, or do you want full support for HTML and Webpack? We're going to go with a full application for now, because that's what people are probably mostly going to be doing. The API only is nice, though. Lucky does have full support for rendering JSON output in both of these cases. But with an API only, it skips views and skips Webpack and all of that stuff. So you just get kind of a bare bones API application that you can use to render a JSON API. And it's pretty handy, but we're going to go with full for now. It'll ask you if you want to generate authentication. We're going to go ahead and say yes for now. You know what? Let's say no. Authentication is kind of another beast, and I don't want to get into that right now. So we're going to cd into test project. let's show it that way. So here are all the files that we end up with. Starting from the top, bsconfig is for browser. I can't remember what it's called right now off the top of my head. Browser sync. There we go. Duh. So this is your browser sync config file. You can see it created a get ignore travis.yaml for us, default editor config, default .env, default crystal version. This is used by the crystal version manager. I can't remember what it's called because I don't use it. Created a package.json for us. Which you can see includes Rails UGS, normalized SCSS, turbolinks. It's got some like a Heroku script in here for us, dev, watch, prod, all of our dependencies. It created a proc file, which is useful for Heroku. It created a proc file.dev, which is useful for running locally, and we'll take a look at this again in a second. It's got the default README, our shard.yaml. You can see it created it with our project name, crystal version, and it's got all of the lucky dependencies as well as .env here, which is helpful. Tasks.cr. So if you want to install a shard that provides a lucky task, this would be a good place to import it. We'll go over tasks again in a minute. And webpack.mix.js. So this actually uses Laravel Mix for Webpack because it's fairly framework agnostic and it's really helpful. You can view the docs here. You can add plugins right in there, and it'll automatically add them all. You can see it set up a default like JavaScript file, Sass file, all of this fun stuff, disable notifications. The only time you'll get a notification, because we're using this Webpack notifier plugin, the only time you're going to get a notification is when something goes wrong, and then another notification after something goes right, and after something's gone wrong. So it's easier to show than to talk about. Directory structure, we have a config folder. So the configuration is fairly simple. You don't actually need to change anything in here to get started. So like colors, that just tells the logger whether or not to colorize logs. This you might want to change if you're like outputting your logs to a file. Cookies, you can set like an expires for cookies and everything. Database, this is the only one that you might have to touch, but you shouldn't have to. Currently, Avram, the ORM that Lucky uses by default, which I highly recommend using. It's probably one of the best ORMs that exists in the Crystal community right now, and I don't imagine that's going to change. But Avram does have one downside in that it only has a Postgres adapter right now. So you're kind of forced into using Postgres. Hopefully that'll change, but for now, that's the way things are. So, like, database name is the only thing that I can think of that you might want to change here. You could set this to an environment variable as well, but everything else here, you just go down to your .env file and add a value right in there. Email, Crystal comes with built-in support for SendGrid using their Carbon shard. So that can be very helpful, just like Rails has built-in support for sending emails. env is just going to load the environment and set a environment name. In this case, if lucky env is not set, it's going to set it to development, and it's going to create a getter, like a question mark getter, so you can go like env.development, something like that. Error handler, don't really need to worry about it right now. HTML page, don't really need to worry. Logger, this you could change if you have something specific that you want to do for logging, but you don't really need to touch it. Route helper. Once again, like if you're using a different local domain, like localhost.localdomain or localhost.dev or whatever, something that you've set in your host file, you might want to change this. But other than that, there's no real reason to touch it. You can just set the app domain and environment variable for production. And server.cr. This, if you don't want to expose your project to the local network for whatever reason, you can set that. Really, this should probably be an environment variable as well. Maybe I'll make a pull request to change this. But yeah, you can set like the secret key. This is used for cookies and like session information, I believe. Set the host and the port. Can force SSL. But yeah, you can see like that secret key. You can create a new one with luckygen.secretkey. We'll take a look at the client help in a minute. And watch.yaml, this just sets the watcher port, which I believe is used for this, but I'm not actually 100% sure. So that's configuration. You really don't need to touch anything in there. In fact, locally, as long as your database username and password are Postgres, and it's running on the default port and the default host, you don't need to touch this at all. If you do have Postgres installed under, like, you're using a different username or have a different password for Postgres or whatever, you can just set the environment variable, db username, db password, to the correct values, and it should connect correctly. So this is where migrations will be put. If you're not familiar with migrations, if you haven't used a framework that works with them, we'll go over those in a minute. You have a public folder. This is going to be served statically to the host. So everything in this will be available at the root directory. So favicon.ico is going to be available to the local directory at, your domain /favicon. Assets folder only has an images folder by default, so you can move images in there. JavaScript, CSS will be put here as well. But yeah, that's what the public folder is for. I had a pull request merged recently that will also add a default robots.txt file to this. So if you're watching this video at a later date, using lucky 0.20 or something, that'll probably be there. Script directory. This includes our setup script, which you can take a look at. Nothing nefarious going on here, but you are supposed to run this after starting a new project. So, and we're going to do that. Yeah, so it's pretty simple stuff. It just it checks if Postgres is installed, makes sure you install it, checks that Yarn is installed because it uses Yarn. Hopefully, in the future, we can have this check for Yarn and NPM and use either of them. Use whichever one's installed, maybe defaulting to Yarn. But it'll use Yarn to install the dependencies, compile the assets, install shards, using shards. Then it checks if a process runner is installed. So let's get into that. I'm pretty sure they actually mentioned needing the process runner here? Yes. So Lucky uses a process manager to watch assets and start the server in development. So they recommend either using Overmind, you can use Heroku CLI if you're planning on deploying to Heroku, Forgo, Foreman, they all work very well. I use Overmind primarily because it's recommended. It's also fast, fairly easy to install. Not so easy to install on Arch, unfortunately, unless you have Go installed. I think the most recent version of Overmind has some issue with the installer script, but I digress. It's a good tool. It works well. We'll see it running in a little bit. So it checks for that, checks if there's a .env file. If not, it creates one because you do need to have one. Checks if Postgres is installed, creates a database, verifies the database, migrates the database, creates required seeds and sample seeds if there are any, and then tells you to run Lucky Dev to start the app. So, pretty simple script. It just gets everything you need set up so you don't have to do it manually. Spec directory will not go into this in this video, but Lucky does have really good support set up for testing your application. So it's got like flows. We can go over to flows at some other point, boxes. It's got some good concepts for testing your application. Then we get to the meat of the project, the source directory. It's going to be a little bit overwhelming for new people, but just suffice to say, the structure that Lucky has decided to go with it's not exactly the easiest structure in the world. We don't have a routes file. We're not routing actions to, or we're not routing routes to controllers, which are then pulling in models. It's a different approach to MVC. Personally, I like it. I think it works. It forces you to think a little bit more about the flow of your project. But let's just get into it. So actions, what are they? It comes with a couple by default and some sub ones. If we take a look at the browser action, anyone that's used Rails should recognize protect from forgery here. Accepted formats tells us what formats this action accepts. and is there a better way to put that? It's going to default to HTML. So it's going to allow you to call either route.html or route.json, or just the route. And if you just call the route, it's going to default to HTML. It's going to send you to the HTML response. If you call .json, it's going to send you to the JSON response. If it exists, otherwise it should still default to HTML. So it's pretty simple so far. API actions are a little bit different because they just accept JSON and they don't have protect from forgery turned on by default. So mixins is a place where you keep like common patterns used throughout. You can think of this as Rails concerns directory. And it gives us a couple of defaults. So we have this home action, which by default just renders the lucky welcome page, which we'll take a look at in a minute. And we've got the error action, which is pretty complicated. You're not going to need to change this starting out. But this is a kind of cool thing down here. So they have this report thing by default in here, which I think is called, but it's not actually used by default. And so every time a report gets called, it passes in an exception. And then you can put whatever you want in here to log those exceptions, send them to rollbar, send an email, send a text message using the Twilio API. You can do all kinds of things with those errors, which you shouldn't be getting as many errors as you do with, say, a Rails application because of that compiled thing. And it's not going to report any errors found in here. So the route not found error is our 404 error. It's not going to report those, which is nice. It will report any error that's not found in here. So 503 errors, which are going to be the big ones, and any internal server errors are going to get reported. So yeah, it's a handy thing. It's a beast of a file. You have to really read through it and kind of understand what's going on there. But let's go back to our home index page here, our action. So you can see here it has a get, and that looks an awful lot like a route, and that's because it is. So actions are actually a replacement for routes. You don't have to do a routes file. Lucky's just going to look inside of the actions folder, import everything that's in there, and compile them, and that's how it's going to generate routes. So you can see get /, which is our home, is going to render the lucky welcome page, which you can see if we just go. We haven't run shards install yet, so we don't have a lib directory, so I can't show you it here. I could show you it in GitHub, but it's not really important right now. It's just going to render the default lucky welcome page. That's all that matters. So you can inherit from browser action or API action to do whatever you want to do. So that's actions. Actions are basically a mixture of controllers and routes. Do your business logic here. Components are kind of shared pieces of logic between pages. So you can see we've got like our layout head here. This may look weird. We're going to go over this when we get down to pages, but this is one of the coolest parts about Lucky right here, the way that they do HTML. But we'll get to that. So shared components, this is where going to be where you put like shared pieces of pages or components in general. If you just want to split a page apart into different components, that's where you can put it. CSS actually has Sass in it, but this all compiles to CSS. And see it has some default styles here in app.sass. Let's shrink this down a little bit. So you can see it has some default styles. You can just delete basically everything from here to there. Just get rid of it. I'm going to leave it for now, but you can do that. And then it has some default folders. So if you want like component-specific styling, you can put it there. Mixins, you can put here. Variables, you can put here. It defaults you with this configuration structure, which is pretty nice. Emails. So emails are similar-ish to the same in Rails. You can see it has an example here. They've got some more documentation on their website. I haven't actually used this yet. I will be with my new website that I'm working on, so keep tuned. I might make a tutorial specifically on setting up email handling, but for now, we're going to leave it. JS has a default JavaScript file. Let's take a look at this really fast because this is interesting. So we use Rails UJS, their unobtrusive JavaScript, which allows you to use delete, post, put, etc. inside of links. So that's all handled through JavaScript, but it's not something you ever have to touch. Then we also use turbolinks. So are you seeing any similarities between Rails yet? Turbolinks is a Rails thing, or something that at least Rails uses, and it's kind of cool. So let's take a look at it really fast. Turbolinks makes navigating your web application faster. So if you just take a look at these GIFs here, it kind of makes your application seem like a single-page application, even if it's not. So you can see like Basecamp 3 here, uses turbolinks because, I mean, obviously, Basecamp, Rails, they're basically synonymous. Rails was built for Basecamp, or Basecamp on top of Rails, like in the beginning. I can't remember. But I'm pretty sure Rails was built for Basecamp for them to use, and they use it. But you can see, like, there's no page reloads happening. What's happening is basically they're fetching the content of your HTML and putting it inside of the of a container and loading that. So you never have to have like page reloads, page refreshes, and it goes and uses the history API to actually set the address bar here, and yeah, it works pretty well. If you want that single-page application feeling, but don't actually want to deal with writing a React app or a Vue app or Angular or whatever your choice technology is, just drop turbolinks in and things will work, as long as you're using Lucky's links. So if you do use turbolinks, you can uncomment this and put any JavaScript that you need inside of here. This is helpful for like if you do want to have turbolinks and Vue, you can install like Vue turbolinks, require the component, and use it, and it works well. So that is that. It's JavaScript. Let's get into models. So models, because we opted not to go with authentication, there's no defaults here. But we can take a look at the base model, which we can see inherits from Avram model, and then includes a self-database method, which is app database. So very basic here. We'll go over model creation in a little bit, but models is part of the MVC thing. Very similar to Rails models. Quite a few differences, but they work similarly and they work really well. And they're statically typed, which is great. So operations, not going to go over right now. If you want, you can always go to the documentation. They're just for creating and updating records in database. We will go over this when we go over models, but I'm not going to deal with it right now. Pages. This part is important. So we don't have any default pages other than the error page, which is a show page, which, as you can see, it's not inheriting from main layout because they want it to be like completely custom. So this is actually a good time to go into the structure of a Lucky page from the very bottom or top. However, I guess we're on the top here, so let's say top. So a Lucky HTML page, it has a couple macros here. So the needs macro allows you to describe properties that this page accepts. You're never going to call, like errors.new and pass in properties into it. Instead, you do what this action over here is doing. And excuse the sound of helicopters going over. I'm in a noisy area, unfortunately. I do not have any form of soundproofing. So as you can see, like here with the index page, this HTML macro calls lucky welcome page.new with whatever you pass in here. So gram1 foo. So it'll pass that in if your page has this needs macro. This just describes a property. So if it needs a message, you can pass in a message. If it needs a status, you can pass in a status. And these get set as instance variables that you can access from elsewhere in the page. So this render method is synonymous to all pages. All pages are going to have this. And this is somewhat special. So all of these methods, all of them, because these are all methods, they add something to a I/O. So HTML doctype is going to add that doctype tag that goes to the top of an HTML page to the I/O page. Sorry, I can't talk when I'm recording myself for some reason. It's a problem, and I need to work on it. So you can then go and use like HTML, lang, en, do inside of that, and this is going to generate a tag. Do is going to put whatever's inside of this block into that tag. So you usually have a head. It sets a head. Sets the UTF-8 char set. Sets a title. And like load lato font is a method that's described below. Normalized styles, error page styles. These are all separate methods, which is something that you can do with this. You don't have to componentize something if you want to make things a little bit more navigable. So I'll go over that in just a second here. So we've got our body, we've got a div with a class. So this is one of the great things about Crystal not having keywords necessarily. You can use anything you want in a key value, and it just works, including class, which is technically a keyword. So we're going to set H2 status, H1 message, all that fun stuff. Load Lato font is going to create a CSS link. Normalized styles, they just copy-pasted like a whole normalized CSS block in here, and that just works. Error page styles is also CSS, but you can see, like, so most editors have the ability to highlight code inside doc blocks. For some reason, I think I just don't have the plugin installed to do this, but CSS would normally be highlighted inside of a doc block. If I go open this up in VS Code instead, go back to source, pages, errors, show page, and increase the size a bit here for you. Go back down here. You can see not only is the normalized CSS, like, it's not wrapping, so that's a little bit cleaner. Everything's highlighted here, which is really cool. This is kind of it's like Vue, how Vue has their template and script and style tags inside of a Vue file. You can do a similar thing here. You can put all of your styles for that specific page directly inside of the page. Do I recommend doing this? No. This is good for like one-off pages like this HTML, like this error page, where you don't want style, like global styles for the rest of the site to affect it. So that's why we're including Lucky HTML page here, and providing our own styles and everything. But let's get back to Vim. So, but that's it. That's what a view in Lucky comes down to. Now, I wasn't a massive fan of this to begin with because I was used to using ERB or ECR in terms of Crystal, or handlebars, or any number of other Vue frameworks. I like this better now. This is intuitive, type safe. You don't have to worry about doing something wrong. You don't have to worry about getting a method name wrong, about getting a type wrong, about passing in the wrong thing, doing something that you're not supposed to be able to, and HTML just lets you get away with it. Now, something I will go over really quick. That's how you create a tag that is not supported by default. There is no SVG method to create SVG tags, so that's just not there. This could be added, and I really think that it would be a cool thing to have the ability to create SVGs inside of Crystal using some kind of nice DSL like this. It's just not there right now. So that's a thing you can do. The only other thing, can't type either. P tags are para. This is because Crystal, like Ruby, has a globally defined method already on the base object, on kernel in Ruby, and can't remember what it's called in Crystal. But they already have a method called P, which is a shortcut to either puts or pretty print. I can't remember. I know PP is pretty print. I think P might just be puts, a shortcut for it. But either way, they didn't want to override that for the sake of a nice DSL, which I understand. So it's PARA, para, for paragraph instead of P, which I think is a okay compromise. So you can see all pages inherit from main layout, and the main layout has a couple of abstract defs here. So it's got content, page title. This is, they're overloadable. So if you create a page that inherits from the main layout, all you have to do is just define page title here and define like a content method, and the content method will be put inside of here. So you'll probably use that instead of render when inheriting from main layout, unless you just want to completely circumvent this render method and do your own, in which case you can probably just create a new layout. Page title will automatically add whatever's in here to the page title. You can see it gets passed into the shared layout head component. And if we go back over, now that we've gone over pages, shared layout head, you can see title, my app, dash, page title. So you can change this up however you want. CSS link, asset. So asset will automatically link to things inside of the public directory. You can also add like this data turbo links track to reload things. You can add the defer to defer JavaScript loading. You can see it's already set up for turbo links to work right out of the box. This is great. You've also got like flash messages here. If you want to change how flash messages are rendered, I suggest changing this. Field errors. You can see they've got this wordsmith thing, which is pretty cool. They've got an inflector, which I actually also have an inflector on one of my personal projects called Cadmium. And then field. And field is interesting. This is for form building. We can go over this at another time. So that's pages. Pages are simple and complex. They're really interesting and lucky. You don't often see frameworks doing things really differently. They tend to stick with common patterns, which makes sense. I mean, there's something to be said for just being able to jump into a project and already knowing the tools you're working with and being able to use it. But as long as you're using a language like Crystal, you're already going with something kind of new anyway. So, take it as it comes, I guess. Queries. This is another database thing, and we will go over it once we start with the database. Serializers, also database related. And then we've got these files. So app.cr, if you do end up creating like a helpers directory or really anything, this app.cr is loading everything. And loading the asset manifest. And yeah, you probably won't have to change this. If you don't add a folder that's outside of one of these globs, like add a helpers folder or something, then you probably won't have to touch this. App database, I've never had to touch this. App server, So this is where you'd put middleware if you're going to load middleware in. You can see it has a whole bunch of default middleware. So we've got a force SSL handler, HTTP method override handler, log, session, flash, error, route, static compression for compressing static files before serving them, static file handler for public. If you wanted to change the public directory to another path, you could just change these and update it in the Laravel mix file, and you should be good. Route not found handler, and you can add any of your own handlers in there. They just have to inherit from a lucky handler or something like that. I can't remember. Can set a protocol here, which I don't actually know what that's for. I imagine you might be able to use Lucky to create a TCP API or something instead of HTTP. Maybe a TCP or UDP. I don't know if that will work. Yeah, this is pretty straightforward, I think, anyway. I've been doing this for a little while. I've dealt with a few frameworks, but shards.cr. So if you do install a custom shard, just put it in here. This file is loaded by app.cr, and I'm pretty sure it's one of the first things. Yeah, it is the first thing loaded. So any shard that you need, put it in here. It'll be required globally throughout the rest of your app, and you'll just be able to use it. This also loads the .env file. Start server. Pretty simple. Traps interrupt, so it can close the server gracefully. And this is the default file, just because this is what things will look for, like tools will look for this file to compile it. You can set VS Code up so that it automatically looks for project name, project name, .cr in the source directory, and it's just easier to have that there. Last but not least, for a structure tour, tasks. So we'll go over these in a little bit more depth in a minute once we do get the project actually set up. But you can see we have two tasks in here by default. Create required seeds and create sample seeds. Now, seed files, if you're not familiar, are files that get called to populate a database from the beginning. So like required seeds might be things like needed users or companies or whatever, things that are important to get set up from the beginning, like your app cannot function properly without them. And they're pretty easy to set up. So once again, this is an operation. And we'll go over this when we go over the database, which probably will not be this video, so check back later. But yeah, that is an operation. You can do all of your database operations for required things inside there, do all of them for sample things inside here, so this might be like sample blog posts and tags and stuff, or pages if you're like holding page data in a database, or whatever, things that aren't necessary for your application to function. And that's that. That is the full structure, quite a lot, but it's really not bad. It's not really any worse than a Rails application or a default Angular application if we're going front end, or Adonis.js, or anything else that I can think of. It's not that bad, and things are fairly well positioned and documented and easy to understand. So, without further ado, let's get into our database setup. Let's exit that. And all we're going to do is run script setup. It's going to install dependencies for us, which there are quite a few of. Now you are going to make sure you have Postgres installed and configured. If you have a different database user, make sure to set that up in the env file. No, for my purposes, I went ahead and set my Postgres user's password to Postgres, so this should work. If not, we're going to get an error. I guess we'll see. So you can see it's installing all the shards. It's running the pre-compile tasks for Lucky. This is going to take a second. Okay, I had to skip over the installation process of the shards. OBS was not having it with all the memory that, all the processing power that it was using to run those pre-compiled tasks. So now it's going to create the database. This, for some reason, takes a second. And once again, we're getting an overloaded encoder. Should be okay now. Going to verify the Postgres connection, migrate the database, which there's nothing to migrate right now, so that should be easy. Seeding, there's no seeds. Now keep in mind, it does have to compile each of these things as it goes, which is probably why they take a little bit. So it's done. It works. It's installed. Took 3.5 minutes for the initial setup, which is a little bit of time. I'm not gonna lie. But that comes down to Crystal, really, more than anything. And heck, I've had Node.js projects take that long or longer, especially if they have native extensions. So let's follow their instructions here. Lucky dev. As you can see, it's getting everything set up. It's using the proc file. This is all coming from Overmind. So you can see, like, we've got this web, which is for the application itself, and assets is Laravel Mix. Starting them, showing their PIDs. We've got like a tmux socket. Pretty interesting stuff. Compiling using. So this is compiling the application. Then it's running yarn, watching the asset files. This finished compiling. Now it's running and starting our development server. So we're proxying the app through to here using Browserify. So if we open this up, there we go. There is our welcome page. This is the page being rendered by Lucky welcome page. If I just realized I started the server in this current directory, so cd tmp test project, and let's actually open this in VS Code right now, make navigating a little bit easier for you guys. So Now we've got node modules, we've got our lib folder, we've got our bin folder, which this is what I was talking about with the it compiling all of the client files down. Yeah, that's really it. Now, if we do lucky, that's not going to work. Lucky help, you can see this takes a second, because once again it has to compile again. I mean, it takes 7 seconds to run the help. There's worse things in the world. And there are a lot of things you can do. So you can compile the app for production using build.release. You can create a new database. These are those tasks. So if we go back into the tasks folder, you can see this is put under the DB namespace and called create required seeds. Then this gets taken, converted to a snake case, and put as create required seeds. And we've got a summary here, which is the help for it. So you can see this. It's like Rake. It's very similar. Works similarly. You can put your tasks in here. This call task. You should be able to accept arguments just like you would normally by using RV. So, pretty interesting. You can drop the database, migrate just one migration, check the status of migrations, redo the last migration, reset all migrations, so drop all the tables, recreate them, run migrations, roll back, just drop the last migration, roll back all, roll back all, roll back 2, roll back to a specific one. You can dump the schema to an SQL file, which is nice. You can also restore the schema from a SQL file, verify the connection. So lots you can do with the database. These are all Avram things, and I'm pretty sure they're actually included as a part of the Avram shard. So if I go down here, source, Avram, tasks, DB, yeah. So you can see they're all right there. So you can do like, see the migrate task. It actually does have a help message. That's interesting. I actually didn't know the tasks had that. But yeah, it's pretty cool. You can also go to like gen, migration, and you can see how they accept arguments. So in this case, we've got 2 initialize methods, it looks like, and which takes a name, your contents, rollback contents. This is a pretty complicated setup here. And then call takes a name. So I guess that's how you do arguments then. Once again, excuse the noise. Big trucks driving by. So that's that part. Lucky exec. This is one of the coolest things I think that they've come out with for Lucky. So Lucky, obviously, it's using Crystal. It's compiled. Compilation doesn't bode very well for REPLs. There is ICR, which allows you to, run Crystal commands, and then it goes and compiles it. And, it works, but it's not exactly the best thing for a compiled language. Especially not when you're relying on a type system and you might want to do complicated things. So their solution here with Lucky is to have Lucky exec. And what this does is it opens a file in your default editor. You can see it's like a temporary file with a random string. And if I open code back up, you can see I've got this tmp/console. That's where it puts them. And this allows you to run anything you want inside of here, and it has access to your entire app. It's very similar to running the Rails REPL, but instead of actually being inside of the terminal, well, I am technically inside of the terminal because this is Vim, but you can do whatever you want down here. You know, you can do stuff like this. If I just wanted to, what do I want to do? Let's say I just want to log one of these for whatever reason. So I can log home index for some reason. Quit, Lucky exec, it's going to compile it, and run whatever you had in there, and then it'll give you the option to either enter to edit the file and run it again, or you can press Q, enter to quit, and that's that. So it's different from a REPL. I like it better. I think it's pretty awesome. I'm actually suggesting that they add something similar to this to Adonis.js for V5 because they're switching over to TypeScript. And TS Node doesn't have a great API to be able to add, like, connect to it in code and add a custom context and everything. So this would be a perfect solution. And there's another track. So you also have generators. So typically everything is prefixed except for like exec, routes, watch, and those are the only ones that aren't prefixed. Everything else is a prefix command. All of these gen ones create files. So you can generate a new API action, browser action, HTML component migration. Model creates a new model query and a save operation, which are just an operation. Page creates a new page. Resource creates a resourceful model. So it creates a model operation query action on a page. So it creates everything that you need for that one model, very much following the RESTful standard. Gen.secret key regenerates the secret key that's in the configuration. Routes outputs the routes, and watch start and recompiles your projects when files change. This, as far as I know, is the same thing as Lucky Dev, and I think they need to update it. But yeah, that's there. So if I do Lucky Routes, we'll see pretty much what you should expect with us only having one route. We have get action to the root directory root with that action. So let's go ahead and create something. Now, this is running still. And you can see Browser Sync is watching the files. Overmind is also watching files. Browser Sync is watching specifically JavaScript and Sass files. Overmind is watching the application itself. And anytime anything in a project changes, things are going to be updated and the page is going to get refreshed. So let's create a RESTful resource. And we're going to call this a post. Yep. Must provide a supported column type. Oh, right. So this works similar to with Rails when you're generating a model. So we can do like a title. If I can type. I really can't type. So we'll have a title, which is going to have a string. We're going to have a body, which is going to also be a string. And we'll leave it there for now. So look at all these files that it created for us. We didn't have to do these manually. So it created a migration, create posts, generated a post model, created a save post operation, post query, and then it created all of these pages. So we've got index, show, new, create, edit, update, delete, index page, show page, new page, edit page. All of that for us. Let's open this back up. Go to source, actions, posts. There's all of our pages. The cool thing is, it generated these in such a way that we actually don't need to modify anything to use these. So if I go into the model here, see our post model, we've got our column and title, or we've got our title and body. Go into the operations, we've got our save post operation. It's going to permit columns, title, and body. Can go into our pages, posts. These are all of our pages. They're even using fields for creating things. Go to our queries, go to post query. So, theoretically, you can see there are pending migrations, so this isn't going to compile right now. So, we need to do lucky db.migrate to run our migration. Let that finish up really fast. So it migrated our create posts. You can see it hasn't recompiled things because we didn't change anything. If I just go into here and save, it'll recompile it for us. And we shouldn't get any errors. And no errors when you're working with something like this is a really good thing. So now, if I go to Lucky Routes, we should have a few extra routes here. Look at that. So we've still got our home index section, but now we have all these extra routes. We've got a post create, post delete, edit, new. So let's check this out in the browser, why don't we? Let's go up here, go to... Now this, not going to have anything in it, but click new post, look at that. And the default style sheet isn't terrible either, look at that. So, you can create a new post with a title. This is a post. And save it. Look at that. So we've got posts with ID 1, title, hello world, body. This is a post. We can go back to all posts and we can see that there. We can edit it. Update it, maybe make this more excited. Look at that. back to all posts. That's a RESTful resource, and it works amazingly. Like, I didn't have to change anything to make this work by default. Obviously, for actually making this a blog post, I'd have to go and change some styles and all that fun stuff, but see how easy that was. Now, something that I do wish is that I could set, maybe have a type called, like, text block or something, I don't know. SQL has all kinds of extra types. This just uses one for strings, which I think is text or long text or something. I can't remember. But this works. If I wanted to, I could change this to like a text area and add some styles here and everything. But look at that. You can see, like, it's got a get, it's got a put, and it just works. So if I wanted to, I don't know why I'm doing that. So if we wanted to add a new page, we could go back in here and we can say luckygen.page and say we want to create like a home index page so that we don't have the default page showing anymore. So let's go back here. It's still compiling, so it's going to take a second. Okay, now it's done. So now let's go back to the index page. So we got our index page here. Let's say we want to go in here, go to our source, actions, home, index, and instead of this, we want to do home index page. It's going to compile for us. And obviously this takes a second. Look at that. It refreshed for us. We don't have anything in our index page, so let's add something. So if I go back down to pages, home, index page, we've got our content here. I can put whatever I want in here. I can do div, class, hello world. Make sure you do there. Put a like paragraph tag in here, which can have whatever I want in there. So let's say like I want to do a here doc type thing. Just have text in there. Say and then save that. Go back. It's compiling. Let's wait for it to refresh. There you go. So obviously this isn't. Actually, no. I think this is expected. I'm pretty sure this is just what the styles have for us. Yeah, because we've got everything all nice and centered. But that's really that. That is the basics of Lucky. Directory structure. Directory structure, setting up a model, setting up a whole RESTful resource. We didn't really even have to touch any of that, which is awesome. If you did want to touch it, go to the post model, you can add columns here, you can go into DB migrations, set up a migration here, and remove timestamps. You can add other fields, but that's really all. That's what it comes down to. So thank you if you made it through this entire video. Thank you for sticking with me. I hope you have fun experimenting with Lucky. I know I have. And I'll catch you in the next video.